Hi guys, today's lesson is on solving two-step equations. And so you do this much like solving one-step equations, only you're going to need to do two steps to isolate your variable. So you'll find that you're going to be undoing addition and subtraction and undoing multiplication and division. So I will walk you through how to do this. So like always, you're going to ask yourself, what's my variable? And then what's there with my variable on that same side of the equation. And then first you're going to undo any addition and subtraction. And at the end of this, I'll give you a trick on how to remember that. So how do I undo those using an inverse operation? Sorry. First, ask yourself, how do I undo those using an inverse operation? So then first you'll undo any addition and subtraction. And remember, what you do to one side, you must do to the other. And then you will undo any multiplication or division. And again, what you do to one side, you must do to the other. And always don't forget what your goal is, and your goal is to isolate that variable. So I'll do a few of these examples with you, and at the end I'll go ahead and give you a trick on how to remember. So 2x plus 3 is 13, so what's my variable? Well, it's x. What's there with it on the same side of the equation? I have plus 3 and I have times 2. So you're going to undo your addition or subtraction first, so in this case it's addition. So I'm going to undo plus 3 first, and the inverse of adding is subtracting. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides of the equation. And so why did I do that? Well, I'm trying to undo plus 3, and that's exactly what I did. So all that's left over here is 2x. And on the right, I had 13 minus 3 is 10. I'm left with 10. So now I have 2x equals 10. I haven't isolated x yet. I still have a times 2. So how do I undo times 2? Well, I undo times 2 with dividing by 2. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And why did I do that? Well, to undo the times 2. So I'm just left with x on the left. And on the right, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the solution to 2x plus 3 equals 13 is x is 5. So of course I want to go back in and make sure that works. So 2 times 5 gives me 10, and 10 plus 3 is 13, so it works. Next example, 5x minus 2 is 13. So again, identify my variable, it's x. What's with it? Times 5 and minus 2. So I will undo the minus 2 first, and the opposite of subtraction is addition. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides of my equation so that I can undo the minus 2. So again, the whole reason I did that was to undo the minus 2, so that's gone, and I'm left with 5x over here. And on the right, 13 plus 2 is 15. So at this point, I have 5x equals 15. Now I have to undo the times 5. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, so I'll divide both sides by 5. And on the left, 5x divided by 5 just leaves me with x, and 15 divided by 5 leaves me with 3. So in this case, x is 3. Again, you always want to go back and check to make sure you did everything correctly. So if I substitute 3 back in for x, 5 times 3 gives me 15, and 15 minus 2 does give me 13, so everything checks out. I'm good to go. Let's try the next example. So in this case, I have x divided by 4 minus 3 equals negative 2. So again, what's my variable is x. What's with it? I have a divided by 4 and I have a minus 3. So I want to go ahead and undo my addition and subtraction first. In this case, it's subtraction, so I undo minus 3 by adding 3 to both sides of the equation. So I'll add 3 to both sides. Again, the whole reason I did this was to undo the minus 3, so I've done that. I'm left with x divided by 4 on the left, and negative 2 plus 3 is 1 on the right. So x divided by 4 equals 1. Now I need to undo divided by 4. So the opposite, or the inverse, of divided by 4 is times 4. So I'll multiply both sides by 4. And again, the whole reason I did that was to undo divided by 4. So I'm left with x. and 1 times 4 is 4. So the solution here is 4. So let's substitute it back in. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 1 minus 3 is -2. It checks out. I'm good to move on. I believe this is my last example here. X divided by -2 plus 6 equals -3. So I'm going to, again, undo any addition and subtraction I have first. So I have plus 6, and I will undo that by subtracting 6 from both sides. Again, the whole reason I did it here was to undo the plus 6, so I'm left with x divided by -2, and -3 minus 6 is -9. So I will, I still have x divided by 2. I need to undo divided by 2 by multiplying by 2. When I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Again, the whole reason I did it here was to undo divided by 2, which I did. Now I'm just left with x. And -9 times -2 is 18. So x equals 18. Let's test it out. 18 divided by -2 is -9, and -9 plus 6 is -3. Works out for me. So I must have done everything correctly. Oh, there is one more example. -3x plus 2 equals 11. I have a times -3 and a plus 2. So I will undo my addition and subtraction first. In this case, it's addition. I'll undo it with subtraction. So I get -3x. These guys cancel. Equals 9 because 11 minus 2 is 9. I have times -3. How do I undo that? Well, I will divide by -3. They undo each other here. And I'm left with x equals -3. Let's check it out and see if it works. -3 times -3 is 9, and 9 plus 2 is 11, and it all works out. Okay, so I told you I would have a trick to help you remember this. And you might remember when we do order of operations, we do parentheses and then exponents, we multiply and divide from left to right, and we add and subtract from left to right. So that's what we do when we are evaluating an expression. And so now we're solving equations. And so when we solve, we're kind of undoing what's there to isolate the variable. And so when we're evaluating, we multiply and divide before we add and subtract. When we're solving, we're kind of undoing in order to isolate the variable. So I like to compare it to when you get dressed in the morning. So when you wake up every day and you get dressed before you come to school, you put on your pants and then you put on your shoes. So that's like evaluating. But when you come home at the end of the day and you're getting ready for bed, you do it in the opposite order. You kick off your shoes before you take off your pants. It's a little tricky to try and take your pants off before taking your shoes off. So you do it in the opposite order. So I kind of like to think of solving equations as doing the opposite of evaluating. So when you evaluate an expression, we multiply and divide before we add and subtract according to order of operations. But when you're solving and you're undoing, you go ahead and you do it in the opposite order. So you undo your addition and subtraction before you undo your multiplication and division. Another way to think of it is if you have a present and you've wrapped it all up and you put a pretty bow on it. Oh, I know this is a really pretty bow. And then you are unwrapping it. So wrapping it, order of operations, unwrapping it, opposite direction. Beautiful, I know. Haha. See you guys tomorrow. Have a great night. Fill in your note sheet. And we'll do some practice with this for the next couple of days. Adios.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.